You think God has forgotten you. You think he's silent, unmoved by your pain. But what if the silence is not absence, it's preparation? What if everything that feels like delay is actually divine design? You may be sitting here today wondering, God, what are you doing with my life? You've prayed, you've waited, you've cried, and yet nothing seems to move. The heavens are silent. You look at others and say, why are their prayers answered and mine still hanging in the air? But let me tell you something that may shake you. God's silence is not his absence. He is not ignoring you. He is not punishing you. He is not delaying because he enjoys your pain. He is orchestrating something eternal, something far greater than your comfort or your convenience. You see, the God who formed the stars does not operate on your clock. He works in eternity, not urgency. You and I measure life in moments, but God measures it in purpose. And sometimes that purpose is hidden behind disappointment, delay, and denial. You may think God has forgotten the dream he planted in your heart, but the truth is, he's not done. He's developing you before he displays you. Before David ever held the crown, he held a sling in obscurity. Before Joseph ruled Egypt, he was forgotten in a prison cell. Before Moses led a nation, he spent 40 years in the wilderness tending sheep. What if the very thing you call a setback is God's way of setting you apart? What if what feels like abandonment is actually alignment? Listen to me. You cannot rush what God is refining. When God delays, he is not denying you, he's deepening you. The Lord is not building your life to make it comfortable. He's building it to make it eternal. We live in a generation that wants God's blessing without his breaking, his plan without his process. But hear this truth. God never uses a man greatly until he breaks him deeply. Why? Because as long as you are full of self, his spirit cannot fill you. As long as your plan is alive, his plan must wait. That's why some of you are still in the waiting. God's not being cruel. He's being careful. He's removing pride, shaping obedience, and teaching trust. He's pulling away every false dependence so that when his plan unfolds, you'll know it was never you, it was always him. And I tell you, that kind of work takes time. You can't microwave maturity. You can't rush redemption. You must learn to be still, even when your soul screams for movement. The hand of God is not always seen in the miracle. Sometimes it's hidden in the mundane. Sometimes it's not the Red Sea splitting. It's the quiet faith of standing still and believing it will. The same God who moves mountains is the God who teaches you to wait in the valley. And while you're waiting, he's not wasting a second. He's forming character in you, patience, humility, surrender. He's teaching you to trust what you cannot see. You say, but I can't feel him. Then walk by faith, not feeling. You say, but I can't understand his ways. Then remember, his ways are higher than yours. If you could understand everything, he would no longer be God. You see, the danger for many believers is not that they stop believing, but that they start controlling. You try to rewrite what God is still unfolding. You want the ending before the middle is complete. And God says, no, my child, you're not ready yet. Think about Joseph again. He saw dreams of greatness, but then came betrayal, slavery, false accusation, imprisonment. From the outside, it looked like failure. But from heaven's perspective, every step was alignment. The pit positioned him for the palace. The betrayal became the bridge to destiny. That's how God works. He hides progress inside pain. He disguises preparation inside delay. And when the time is right, not when you think it's right, but when he says it's right, he unfolds his plan piece by piece with such precision that you'll look back and say, now I see. Now I understand. But you must endure the season of not knowing. You must be faithful when you feel forgotten. You must trust his hand when you can't trace his plan. Every trial you're in, every tear you've shed, every prayer you've whispered in the dark, God heard it. And he's using it to write a story that will glorify his name, not yours. The plan of God is not about making you successful. It's about making you surrendered. When you finally let go of control, you will see his hand move like never before. When you stop fighting for your way, his way will unfold. Because his plan was never meant to destroy you. It was meant to display his glory through you. Maybe you've been asking, when, Lord? And God is answering, when you're ready. Because sometimes he must first change the heart before he changes the season. Sometimes he withholds the promise until the person he gave it to is prepared to carry it. So if you're in the waiting, don't despise it. If you're in the breaking, don't resist it. The potter knows what he's doing with the clay. And when he's finished, you will be something beautiful. Not because of your strength, but because of his shaping. The plan of God is not unfolding around you. It's unfolding in you. You are not being delayed, you are being developed. And when the fullness of His time comes, what He promised will come to pass. Until then, trust, obey, and stay faithful in the process. There are seasons in life when heaven feels silent. You pray, you wait, and it seems as if the voice that once guided you has grown quiet. The heart begins to whisper, maybe God has turned away. Maybe He doesn't care. That's where faith is tested, not in the fire of open trials, but in the silence of unanswered prayers. When everything seems still and you can no longer feel His presence, you start to question if He's still there. Yet that silence is often the sacred ground where God does His deepest work. The absence you feel is not the absence of His presence, but the concealment of His hand as He shapes what you cannot yet see. The human soul craves noise and confirmation. We want to see movement. We want signs that God is active. When we don't see them, we panic, and in our impatience, we assume He's gone. But faith was never meant to rest on feelings. It was meant to rest on the unshakable truth that God is faithful even when we can't trace Him. Faith is not built in the moments when everything makes sense. It's built in the moments when nothing does. When heaven is quiet and prayers echo back like unanswered letters, God is still working. But He is working in ways that cannot yet be revealed. Throughout Scripture, God's silence was never a sign of His withdrawal, but a mark of His wisdom. Think of Abraham waiting decades for the promise of a son, walking through years of uncertainty and silence. God was not ignoring Abraham. He was enlarging his capacity to trust. The silence wasn't punishment, it was preparation. The same was true for Joseph, who sat forgotten in a prison after receiving dreams of greatness. For years, not a single sign pointed to fulfillment, yet God's hand was moving behind the scenes, weaving divine threads through betrayal, injustice, and waiting. When the silence broke, Joseph's story revealed the beauty of a plan that only God could write. When God seems silent, it is not because He has stopped listening. It is because He is teaching. Silence trains the heart to listen beyond sound. It teaches us to lean on the character of God rather than the comfort of constant answers. You cannot truly know God if you only trust Him when He speaks. You must also learn to trust Him when He is silent. For in that silence, He refines motives, exposes idols, and purifies desires. Sometimes the voice we long to hear is quiet because God is waiting for our hearts to be still enough to recognize that He alone is enough. There are moments when silence feels unbearable. You stand in your room, you cry out, and nothing comes. You open your Bible and every page feels dry. You go to church and songs no longer stir you. But even in that desert, God is near. The silence is not a wall, it's a whisper. It's God saying, will you still trust me when you can't feel me? This is where real faith is born, not in answered prayers, but in enduring ones. God is not ignoring you, He is inviting you deeper. The greatest danger in the silence is not God's absence, but our response to it. When we don't hear from Him, we often fill the void with our own voices. We create plans, make decisions, and chase feelings to replace the comfort His voice once brought. But every time we do that, we step outside His rhythm. God's silence is not a signal to move faster, it's an instruction to be still. The more we learn to rest in that stillness, the more we begin to see that His presence was never gone. It was simply deeper than emotion, beyond understanding, hidden within faith. Look at Elijah. He ran to the cave in despair, longing to hear from God. There was wind, there was an earthquake, there was fire, but God was in none of those. Then came a still, small voice. It wasn't loud or dramatic, it was subtle, almost quiet enough to miss. That's what the silence does. It conditions your spirit to detect the gentle whisper of God that the noise of the world would otherwise drown out. Without the silence, Elijah would have missed the voice. Without the waiting, Joseph would have missed the timing. Without the delay, Abraham would have missed the depth of God's promise. God's silence is strategic. It strips you of the illusion that you can control Him. It breaks the pride that thinks faith must always be rewarded with feelings. It teaches you that God's nearness is not dependent on emotion. There will be days when the heavens seem like brass and your prayers feel like they're bouncing back, but that is when you must remember. He who called you is faithful. The same God who spoke galaxies into being is capable of working in silence to shape your heart. Sometimes God's silence is mercy. If He revealed everything at once, it would crush you. His voice, though beautiful, carries the weight of eternity, and we are not yet strong enough to bear it all. So He speaks through absence, trains us through waiting, and molds us through stillness. What feels like distance is often the nearness of His hands, shaping something eternal within you. Think about a seed buried in the ground. It's dark. It's dark. It's quiet. There's no sound, no movement, no sign of life. But under the soil, something powerful is happening. Roots are spreading. Foundations are forming. If the seed could speak, it might cry, "Why am I hidden? Why am I forgotten?" But the gardener knows the process. The silence of the soil is not the end. It's the beginning of life. That is how God works in his people. You are the seed and the silence is the soil. In those moments when nothing seems to make sense, remember that the silence of God is often louder than his words. It speaks of his sovereignty, his control, and his timing. He is not panicking. He is not improvising. He is working with precision. The silence is where he turns faith from theory into reality, from shallow to steadfast. The enemy will whisper in your ear that God has abandoned you. He will use the silence to sow doubt, to convince you that your prayers are wasted, that your waiting is pointless. But faith answers back, "Even if I cannot hear him, I know he is here." The devil cannot defeat a believer who refuses to measure God's faithfulness by his visible activity. He cannot shake the soul that knows God's character more than his communication. God's silence also protects you. There are doors he will not open because he knows they would destroy you too soon. There are blessings he delays because he wants to anchor you first. The silence keeps you humble, keeps you dependent, keeps you close. If he spoke every time you called, you'd stop seeking his heart and start seeking his hand. But when he withholds his voice, he's drawing you to himself, not just to his answers. Even Jesus experienced the silence of God. On the cross he cried, my God, why have you forsaken me?" For a moment, heaven was silent, and yet that silence was the sound of salvation being secured. If silence was part of his story, it will also be part of yours. But remember, the silence of Friday gave way to the victory of Sunday. God's silence never ends in defeat. It is the pause before resurrection, the stillness before the unveiling, the breath before the breakthrough. So when the heavens feel quiet, do not assume God has turned away. He is closer than ever. The silence is not an absence. It is an atmosphere of creation. It is where he molds you into someone who trusts his character more than his communication, his promise more than his presence, his faithfulness more than his voice. And in time, when he speaks again, you'll realize that the silence was not a delay at all. It was the language of love spoken by a God who was shaping you for something eternal. We live in a world that despises delay. We crave immediacy, quick results, instant answers. But the God of Scripture does not operate according to the impatience of men. He moves according to purpose, not pressure. What looks to you like a delay is often divine precision. What feels like waiting is actually weaving. God's timing is not behind, it is not slow. It is not indecisive. It is wholly, deliberate, perfect. Every step, every pause, every unanswered prayer is a part of a divine rhythm that cannot be rushed. You think you are waiting on God, but in truth, he is waiting on you. Waiting for your heart to yield, your will to bow, your faith to mature. When God delays, he's not punishing you. He's preparing you. We often forget that the promises of God are not random acts of kindness. They are assignments. They require weight, responsibility, humility. And before God places a calling in your hands, he will first refine your heart to carry it. If he gave you what you prayed for too early, it might destroy you. The blessing out of season becomes a burden. So, God delays, not because he's cruel, but because he's careful. He withholds what you desire until you are shaped to desire it for his glory, not your gain. Look at Moses. He was called to lead Israel out of Egypt. But the first time he tried to act on that calling, he did it in his own strength. He killed an Egyptian and fled into the wilderness. For 40 years, God delayed his destiny. 40 years of silence, obscurity, and shepherding sheep in the desert. Why? Because God was removing the Egypt from Moses before he sent him back to deliver others from it. The delay was not a denial, it was a design. When Moses finally stood before Pharaoh, he did so as a man stripped of self, reliance, and filled with divine dependence. That's what God does in delay. He kills the pride that would destroy the purpose. Joseph dreamed of greatness as a teenager, and then everything fell apart. Betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, falsely accused, imprisoned, forgotten. 13 years of what seemed like wasted potential. But in those years, God was aligning every event, every person, every circumstance. The pit was not punishment, it was preparation. The prison was not delay, it was development. When Joseph finally stood before Pharaoh, he was not a boy chasing dreams. He was a man ready to interpret them. The delay refined him. And when the appointed time came, everything unfolded in one divine moment that made sense of all the years of silence. We see delay as a problem. God sees it as a process. We think waiting is wasted time, but waiting is working time for God. He is always active, even when we cannot see movement. The roots grow before the fruit appears. You cannot build a tower without digging deep into the ground first. Likewise, God will not build something public on a foundation that has not been privately tested. The longer the delay, the deeper the foundation He's laying. You cry out for speed, but God answers with stability. You want breakthrough, He wants depth. And when the two finally meet, then comes the unveiling. There is something about delay that reveals who you truly trust. Anyone can believe God when prayers are answered quickly, but true faith is proven in the waiting. When heaven is silent, when doors stay closed, when opportunities vanish, do you still believe He's good? Do you still believe He's sovereign? Faith that cannot wait is faith that cannot last. God delays to teach endurance, to purify belief from emotion. He delays to show you that His promises are not dependent on visible progress, but on His immutable nature. We must understand that divine timing often offends human reasoning. God promised Abraham a son, but decades passed before Isaac was born. Every year of barrenness felt like mockery. Every sunrise was another reminder of an unfulfilled word. But God's promise did not fade with time, it matured with it. Abraham's faith was being stretched beyond sight. If Isaac had come instantly, Abraham would have known God's power, but he would not have learned God's patience. And God values patience because it's the soil where trust grows. There are delays that save you. The relationship that didn't work out, the door that didn't open, the job that never called back, they were not setbacks, they were safeguards. You were praying for what looked right, but God saw what was right. He knows what you can't handle, what would tempt you, what would break you. And sometimes the greatest mercy of God is in the prayer He refuses to answer on your timeline. You call it delay, heaven calls it protection. Even Jesus understood divine delay. When Lazarus was sick, the message reached him, Lord, the one you love is sick. Scripture says Jesus stayed where He was 2 more days. He delayed on purpose. Not because He didn't care, but because He was about to reveal something greater than healing, resurrection. Had He come immediately, Lazarus would have been healed, but the people would have never known His power over death. The delay was the stage for greater glory. That's what your delay is too, a setup for something beyond your expectation. The delays of God are not random. They are tailored to the soul He is shaping. Some of you are frustrated because you're watching others move ahead while you remain still. You see their progress, their promotion, their answered prayers, and you wonder, what about me, Lord? But you don't know their process and you don't know your preparation. God's plan for you is unique. Stop comparing timelines. What He's doing in your life might take longer because it's built to last longer. The danger in delay is discouragement. The enemy will whisper, God forgot you. You've missed your chance. It's too late. But those are lies meant to pull you out of alignment. God never forgets what He starts. Every word He speaks carries eternal weight. The moment He declared purpose over you, the clock of heaven began to move. And though you may not see the hands turning, time is working in your favor. When you can't see progress, look at your heart. Are you being refined? Are you learning humility? Are you growing in dependence? Because that's where real movement happens. Before God changes your season, He changes your soul. Before He opens the next door, He will test your faithfulness with the one that's still shut. The delay is not just about what's coming. It's about who you're becoming while you wait. You must stop interpreting God's timing through the lens of frustration and start seeing it through the lens of formation. Every delay is an invitation to draw closer, to surrender deeper, to believe stronger. God's clock doesn't tick according to man's impatience. He's not late. He's not slow. He's exact. And when the fullness of His time arrives, nothing can stop what He has ordained. But until then, you must learn to rest, to trust that the God who holds eternity can be trusted with your today. The waiting room is not a punishment. It's a classroom. It's where faith graduates from theory to testimony. It's where promises go from words to reality. And every minute in that room is a part of His curriculum. You might not understand it now, but the delay is shaping you into the kind of person who can carry the promise without losing the presence. Because what good is it to receive the blessing if you lose the one who gave it? When you find yourself in divine delay, don't let anxiety take over. Don't try to force what God is still forming. His timing has never failed a single soul who trusted Him. The same God who orchestrated the Red Sea, who timed the resurrection, who aligned centuries of prophecy for Christ's coming, that God is also timing your breakthrough with the same perfection. And though it may not look like movement to you, every second of waiting is a stroke of his hand on the canvas of your destiny. We are a generation that has forgotten how to wait. We demand God to move at the speed of our desires, but he is not bound to our calendars. His timing is eternal, his pace is perfect, and his pauses are purposeful. What looks like a delay to you is divine choreography to him. You kneel and pray, you fast, you cry, you look at the same closed door every day and wonder if heaven has turned away. But delay is not denial. It is the ground where faith is purified, the workshop where character is forged, the season where self-reliance dies and surrender is born. When God delays, he is not withholding good from you. He is teaching you to recognize good as he defines it. You ask for an answer, but he wants to give you understanding. You ask for a miracle, but he wants to give you maturity. He could snap his fingers and give you what you want, but if your heart is not ready, the blessing will break you. So he waits, shaping you in hidden places, sanding away pride, planting roots that can bear the weight of what he will one day reveal. Every story in Scripture bears the mark of divine delay. Noah waited decades for rain. Abraham waited years for a son. David waited while tending sheep, anointed yet unthroned. Joseph waited in prison, gifted yet forgotten. Their delay was not wasted time, it was holy time. Each sunrise of waiting taught them dependence. Each sunset of disappointment trained them to believe beyond sight. And when the appointed hour finally arrived, the purpose of every delay became clear. Delay exposes the motives of the heart. It tests whether you want God or only what he can give. Many walk away when the promise tarries because they never loved the promiser. But those who remain, those who cling to his word, when the world laughs at their hope, they discover a depth of relationship that instant answers could never produce. Waiting becomes worship. Delay becomes devotion. The human mind sees stillness as stagnation, but heaven sees it as preparation. Like a seed buried in the earth, you are hidden so you can grow unseen. God buries greatness before he reveals it. He hides strength beneath struggle. The longer the seed stays underground, the stronger its roots become. And when it finally breaks through the soil, it can withstand the winds that will come. The waiting you despise is the strength you will later need. Delay also separates divine calling from human ambition. When God says, "Not yet," he is protecting you from yourself. He knows how easily the heart can turn the gift into an idol. He knows how quickly success without surrender can corrupt a soul. So he slows you down, not because you're forgotten, but because you're loved. Every pause is mercy disguised as frustration. Every wait is a whisper of grace saying, "I'm preparing something you can't carry yet." Think of the disciples before Pentecost. Jesus told them to wait in Jerusalem until power came from on high. They could have rushed ahead, tried to preach, tried to build, tried to prove. But had they moved without the Spirit, they would have failed without the fire. 10 days of waiting birthed a movement that changed the world. Delay was the womb of destiny. We measure life in minutes. God measures it in maturity. You say, "Lord, I've waited long enough." But he answers, "Not long enough to become who I've called you to be." What you call wasted time, he calls shaping time. Every unanswered prayer, every closed door, every season that refuses to move is carving eternal lessons into your soul. There are delays that rescue you from destruction. The job that slipped away, the relationship that ended, the dream that seemed to die, all of them were intersections where God's mercy stood in front of your impatience. You thought he was late, he was saving you. You thought he forgot, he was building a better route. Delay is often the shield that keeps you from running into disaster. But in the middle of it, the pain is real. The silence is heavy. The temptation to act in your own strength grows louder. This is where faith must anchor itself. Do not mistake divine patience for divine passivity. God is never inactive. Even when nothing appears to move, he is aligning hearts, shifting circumstances, rearranging unseen details. The tapestry of your life is being woven one thread at a time. If you tug on it before he's finished, you'll unravel what he's carefully crafting. Look at Jesus delaying his journey to Lazarus. Everyone said he should have come sooner, but his delay revealed a greater glory. Had he arrived early, Lazarus would have been healed. By waiting, he revealed resurrection. That is the pattern of God. He delays so that when he moves, no man can claim the credit. The longer he waits, the clearer his glory will shine. So when nothing seems to happen, do not interpret it as neglect. Ask instead, "Lord, what are you teaching me in this waiting?" The lesson may be trust, humility, gratitude, or dependence. Whatever it is, it will prepare you for what's ahead. God never wastes a delay. Every pause has purpose. Every waiting room has wisdom. There will come a day when you will look back and see that the very moments you resented were the ones that refined you. The waiting built strength that success could not. The delay carved depth that comfort never would. And though you could not see it then, you will realize that the slow, quiet hand of God was guiding you through every season that felt stalled. For now, when your heart grows restless, breathe. Remember that the clock in heaven is not behind. The God who set the sun to rise at its appointed hour has also set an appointed time for your promise. And though it tarries, wait for it, because it is surely coming, moving toward you even in the silence, gathering strength in the unseen, preparing to arrive at the moment when both you and the miracle are ready for each other. God does not build his servants in comfort. He builds them in the crucible of brokenness. Before he entrusts you with his power, he must first strip you of your pride. Before he calls you to stand before men, he will bring you low before himself. We live in a generation that wants glory without the cross, purpose without pain, anointing without crushing. But heaven's pattern has never changed: death before resurrection, breaking before blessing, surrender before sending. God never uses a man greatly until he breaks him deeply, because brokenness is the only soil soft enough to grow true humility. When God sets his hand on a person, the first thing he often does is to dismantle everything that was built on self. The plans, the confidence, the dependence on one's own strength, all of it must die. You may have dreamed of serving him, speaking for him, being used by him, but when he begins to answer that desire, he doesn't start by giving you a platform. He starts by giving you a cross. He takes you through places where you no longer understand, where every crutch is removed, where every illusion of control is shattered. In that wilderness of breaking, your heart learns what surrender truly means. Brokenness is not simply pain, it is transformation. It's when God allows circumstances to press so hard against your will that something in you finally yields. You stop fighting for your own way. You stop demanding that life move on your terms. And in that surrender, something sacred happens. Your dependence shifts from yourself to him. Before brokenness, prayer is often a discipline. After brokenness, it becomes your breath. Before brokenness, faith is an idea. After brokenness, it is the only thing that keeps you standing. Consider Jacob. All his life he wrestled for control, manipulating situations, deceiving, striving to secure blessing on his own terms. But one night, God met him and wrestled with him until dawn. When the struggle ended, Jacob was left limping, his strength gone. Yet in that limp, he found his new name, Israel. The man who once fought to take became the man who learned to receive. God touched his hip not to harm him, but to mark him. That limp was a lifelong reminder that power comes through weakness. The blessing did not arrive until after the breaking. Or look at Peter. Bold, confident, outspoken, he swore he would never deny the Lord. Yet when the pressure came, he failed miserably. The rooster crowed, and Peter wept bitterly. In that moment, his pride collapsed. The man who thought he could stand fell, and in his fall, God began rebuilding him. After the resurrection, Jesus restored Peter not with condemnation, but with grace. That restoration birthed a different man, no longer driven by bravado, but by broken love. The same man who once cowered before a servant girl later stood before thousands at Pentecost. That kind of courage is only born out of brokenness. Brokenness also strips away false identities. You may think you know who you are until God allows life to crush the image you built. The career you relied on fails. The relationship you thought defined you ends. The plans you cherished dissolve. And in that emptiness, you are forced to face the truth. You are not what you do. You are who God says you are. He breaks you to reveal your true identity, not the one built by performance or pride, but the one rooted in his love. When God breaks you, he does not destroy you. He refines you. A potter must crush the clay if there are flaws hidden within it, not to discard it, but to remake it into something stronger. The crushing is not rejection, it is restoration. It is God saying, I will not let you stay the same, because I see what you can become. Brokenness is proof of his care, not his cruelty. He could leave you untouched, comfortable, self-sufficient, but that would leave you shallow, unprepared, unchanged. So instead, he places you on the wheel, presses his thumb into your soul, and reshapes you until your heart reflects his. Brokenness purifies motives. It exposes the difference between serving God for recognition and serving him out of love. Before breaking, ministry can be about achievement. After breaking, it becomes about obedience. Before breaking, worship can be a performance. After breaking, it becomes the cry of a desperate heart. Broken people don't need applause. They've met God in the ashes and found that he alone is enough. There is a mystery in how God uses pain to produce purity. The things you once thought would destroy you become the very tools he uses to shape you. The tears you cried in private become the oil that anoints you in public. Every scar becomes a testimony. Every failure becomes a lesson. Every wound becomes an opening through which his light shines. Paul said, "We have this treasure in jars of clay." Why clay? Because clay cracks, and through those cracks, the glory of God is revealed. Your weakness is not your disqualification. It is the vessel through which his strength is displayed. The process of brokenness often feels lonely. Friends may not understand. Others may interpret your struggle as punishment. But the breaking season is personal. It's between you and God. In those quiet nights when you have no strength left to pray, when your heart feels like shattered glass, he is near. The same hand that allows the breaking also holds the pieces. You may not see him, but he is there, shaping every fragment into something beautiful. The very place of your deepest pain can become the birthplace of your greatest purpose. Brokenness changes how you see others, too. When you've been through the fire, you stop judging people who are still in it. Compassion replaces criticism. Grace replaces arrogance. You begin to speak not as one above others, but as one among them. Someone who knows what it means to be rescued by mercy. That is why God allows his servants to be broken. So when they speak, their words carry the weight of experience, the tenderness of empathy, and the authority of one who has walked through the valley and found God faithful there. There are no shortcuts to this process. You can't bypass the wilderness and expect the same depth. You can't skip the pain and expect the same power. The wilderness strips you of distractions until only God remains. The breaking kills the illusion that you can handle life on your own. And when all that remains is dependence, then, and only then, can God trust you with his purpose. When you are broken, worship becomes raw and real. You no longer sing to impress, you sing to survive. You no longer pray to perform. You pray because you cannot breathe without him. You stop trying to prove yourself, and instead, you pour yourself out. That is the beauty of brokenness. It creates authenticity. It removes the mask, silences the performance, and allows the real you to stand before the real God. You may be walking through that breaking even now, feeling like everything you once leaned on has been stripped away. You are not being destroyed, you are being rebuilt. Every tear, every disappointment, every failure is shaping you for something greater. The hand that wounds is the same hand that heals. And when the breaking is complete, you will not be the same person who entered it. You will walk with a limp like Jacob, a reminder that you have seen God face to face and survived. You will carry the fragrance of surrender, the strength of humility, the wisdom of one who knows that brokenness was never the end of you. It was the beginning of who you were always meant to be. There are times in life when it feels like nothing is happening, when all your prayers seem to hang unanswered in the air, when every step forward feels like walking through fog. You wonder if God has stopped working, if his promises have somehow expired. But the truth is that the hand of God often moves in hidden ways. He is most active when he appears most silent. The hidden work of God's hand is the mystery that sustains the believer through the dark seasons, when sight fails and only trust remains. God hides his hand not to distance himself, but to deepen your faith. The unseen is where he does his greatest shaping. We often imagine God's work as loud and visible, miracles, breakthroughs, open doors. Yet the greatest works of God are rarely dramatic. They are quiet, steady, unseen. Like a seed buried in the soil, his power operates beneath the surface, unseen but unstoppable. If you were to look at the ground, you would think nothing is happening. But deep below, roots are stretching, life is forming, strength is being built. That is how God works in the life of his people. You may not see progress, but beneath the soil of waiting, his hand is moving. He's aligning circumstances, orchestrating events, refining your heart, and building the foundation for what's to come. Think of Joseph when he was sitting in the prison cell, forgotten by everyone he had helped. From his perspective, it must have felt like abandonment. But in heaven's perspective, God's hand was moving with precision. The very people who forgot him were the ones who would later open the door to his destiny. Every day in that cell was not wasted. It was preparation for the palace. God was forming character in obscurity that would later sustain him in authority. The work was hidden, but it was holy. The hidden work of God is not random, it is intentional. There are lessons that cannot be learned in the spotlight. There are strengths that cannot be forged in ease. God hides you not because he's done with you, but because he's not finished preparing you. Hiddenness is not rejection, it is refinement. Before God reveals a vessel to the world, he first perfects it in private. David was anointed to be king long before he ever sat on the throne. But where did God train him? Not in palaces, but in pastures. While the world overlooked him, heaven was watching. The lion and the bear were part of the curriculum that prepared him for Goliath. The hidden seasons are God's classrooms. They look ordinary, but they carry eternal weight. There are seasons when you pray and hear nothing, when you knock and no door opens, when you serve and no one notices. Those are not wasted seasons. They are the seasons where God is teaching you to walk by faith, not by validation. If every prayer were answered instantly, you would never develop endurance. If every effort were rewarded publicly, you would never learn to work for God alone. Hidden seasons purify motives. They strip away the need to be seen and teach you to be content with simply being known by God. God's hidden work also protects you. There are places he keeps you from until you are ready to stand in them without falling. You think he's delaying your promotion, but he's shielding you from premature exposure. He knows that visibility without maturity leads to collapse. He hides you in the cleft of the rock like he did with Moses so you can survive the weight of his glory when it comes. The hiding is mercy, not neglect. Even when you cannot feel it, God's hand is guiding your steps. There are moments you think you are lost, but he is leading you through detours that are really divine routes. Every closed door, every unexpected delay, every disappointment has his fingerprints on it. When you look back, you'll realize that what looked like random chaos was actually careful orchestration. He was steering your path away from traps you didn't see, preparing opportunities you couldn't imagine. The hidden hand of God also works in the hearts of others. While you're waiting, he's speaking to people you haven't met yet, preparing situations that will intersect with your purpose. You think nothing's changing, but behind the scenes, he's moving pieces on the board of your life. Like a master chess player, he sees the whole game while you only see one move. His strategies are hidden because his wisdom is beyond your understanding. In the silence, God is shaping you. He's teaching patience when you want control, humility when you crave recognition, dependence when you want independence. He allows you to sit in what feels like stillness because stillness exposes your heart. It reveals whether you trust his character or only his activity. When you can no longer see his hand, will you still trust his heart? That is the question the hidden season asks. Elijah found himself in a cave, weary and discouraged, wanting to see God move as he had before. There came a strong wind, then an earthquake, then fire. But God was in none of those. After them came a still small voice. That whisper was the hidden hand of God, the quiet assurance that his presence had never left. God often works not in the earthquake of miracles, but in the whisper of unseen grace. The hidden work is also generational. Sometimes God is doing something in you that won't fully manifest in your lifetime. He's preparing foundations for those who will come after you. Abraham didn't see the full extent of the promise, but through him, God set in motion a covenant that would outlive him. Your obedience in secret can become the seed of blessing for generations yet unborn. What you see as small may be sacred in eternity's view. Hidden seasons test your devotion. When no one claps, when no one thanks you, when no one notices, do you still serve? God watches what you do when the spotlight is off. It is in those unseen moments that he measures faithfulness. If you can worship in obscurity, you are ready for responsibility. If you can be trusted with silence, you can be trusted with sound. Heaven's promotions are given to those who have passed the test of hiddenness. The hand of God is also hidden in suffering. Pain blinds us to his work, but even in the valley, he is weaving purpose through tears. The very affliction that feels unbearable may be producing a depth of compassion and strength that no easy path could ever give. He turns your wounds into wells that refresh others. The pressure that seems to crush you now will one day flow out of you as wisdom and empathy. There is a hidden order in the waiting. You think you're standing still, but God is aligning time and space. You are like an arrow pulled back in the bow. The further back he draws you, the greater the force with which he will release you. But if you resist the tension, you'll miss the target. Trust the pull. Trust the stillness. Trust the unseen hand holding you steady until the right moment arrives. God is a God of the unseen. He hides the sunrise behind the horizon until the appointed hour. He hides the baby in the womb until the appointed day. He hides the promise and process until faith has done its work. His ways are hidden because his purpose is holy. The invisible seasons are not the absence of his activity. They are the architecture of your destiny being built in silence. When God finally brings you to the place he has been preparing, it will not be by your striving, but by his sovereignty. Everything he has done, the waiting, the breaking, the silence, was leading you here. You will stand in the fulfillment and realize that none of it was random. Every delay was a design. Every pain had purpose. Every unanswered prayer was part of the preparation. The fulfillment of God's plan in your life is not something you achieve by willpower. It is something you walk into by obedience. You arrive not because you figured it out, but because He guided you step by step through what often looked like confusion. When the plan of God begins to unfold openly, it rarely looks like what you imagined. His fulfillment is always higher than your expectation. You may have prayed for a door, but He gives you a destiny. You may have asked for comfort, but He gives you calling. God's fulfillment is not about satisfying your desires. It's about completing His design. And when you finally see the pattern of His hand, you understand why He had to take you the long way. If He had given it sooner, you wouldn't have been ready. If He had revealed it all at once, you would have been overwhelmed. The waiting was mercy, not delay. When fulfillment comes, humility must remain. It is easy to forget the tears that watered the ground of your calling. It's easy to start thinking the blessing came because of your effort. But every true servant of God knows that fulfillment is not a reward, it is a responsibility. The moment God's purpose begins to manifest, the enemy will whisper pride, entitlement, or complacency. But the heart that remembers the breaking will remain low before God. You will walk into the promise not as a conqueror demanding recognition, but as a servant carrying gratitude. The scars remind you who deserves the glory. When the plan unfolds, it doesn't mean the trials end. Fulfillment often brings a new kind of warfare. The promise attracts opposition because it carries impact. The same God who led you through the wilderness will now sustain you in the battle. What you learned in private, dependence, prayer, surrender, becomes the foundation that keeps you standing in public. You cannot enjoy the fruit of fulfillment without the discipline of faith that was formed in the dark. The moment you think you can now rely on yourself again is the moment you begin to drift. God fulfills His plan, but He also keeps you reliant on His power. Look at Joseph again. When he finally stood before Pharaoh, elevated from the dungeon to the throne, it wasn't triumphalism that marked him. It was wisdom. Years of being forgotten, betrayed, and humbled had shaped him into a vessel fit for leadership. When his brothers came, he could have taken revenge, but he saw something greater. You meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. That was the language of fulfillment. It's when you look back and realize that even the painful chapters were written by a faithful hand. The plan was never just about Joseph's success, it was about saving nations. God's fulfillment always extends beyond you. It touches others through you. When God fulfills His plan, it brings peace, not because life becomes easy, but because you finally align with His purpose. The inner rest you once longed for doesn't come from circumstances changing, it comes from seeing that everything had meaning. You start recognizing divine patterns everywhere. The people who entered and left your life, the doors that closed, the storms that forced you to move. You realize that if even one thing had gone differently, you might not be standing where you are. The sovereignty of God becomes not just a doctrine, but a reality you've lived. There is a moment in every believer's journey where fulfillment feels both glorious and sobering. Glorious because you see the hand of God vindicating your faith, but sobering because you realize the plan is not about comfort, it's about calling. God doesn't fulfill His plan just so you can rest. He fulfills it so you can serve. The blessing is not an endpoint, but a platform. When the dream Joseph once had as a teenager finally came true, he didn't retire in satisfaction. He became a steward of Egypt's survival. Fulfillment always carries responsibility. Sometimes the fulfillment doesn't come in the way you thought. You may not see the promise exactly as you imagined it, but that doesn't mean it hasn't come to pass. God's ways are higher. Abraham saw the promise of a son, but the greater fulfillment was the birth of a nation. Moses led Israel to the border of the promised land, but didn't enter, yet his mission was fulfilled because God's purpose through him was accomplished. Fulfillment is not always about you finishing the picture. It's about your obedience fitting perfectly into God's eternal masterpiece. When you begin to walk in fulfillment, gratitude must become your language. Remember the days when you prayed for what you now have. Remember when you begged for clarity, and now you stand in what once seemed impossible. Gratitude keeps your heart soft. It prevents success from corrupting you. It turns every blessing into worship. When you thank God for His faithfulness, you remind your soul that it was grace that brought you here. Fulfillment also reveals the faithfulness of God to those who doubted you. There were people who couldn't see what God was doing in your life, who mocked your obedience, who thought your waiting was wasted. When fulfillment comes, it's not about proving them wrong. It's about proving God right. Your life becomes a testimony that His timing is perfect. People see the fruit, but you know the root. It grew in darkness, watered by tears. The fulfillment becomes an altar of remembrance where you can look back and say, "He kept His word." There's also a danger in fulfillment, the danger of forgetting the God of the process. When life starts to stabilize, when prayers turn into praise, you must guard against the subtle drift of complacency. Israel saw the Red Sea part and manna fall, yet in comfort they forgot the one who delivered them. The promise is not meant to replace your pursuit of God. The blessing should never take the place of the blesser. Stay close. The same dependence that carried you through the wilderness must carry you through abundance. In fulfillment, you also discover that the process never truly ends. God's plan is layered. Every fulfillment becomes the foundation for a new calling. What you once thought was the destination turns out to be preparation for something greater. The story continues because God's purpose in your life is not just to bring you somewhere, but to make you someone more like Christ. The plan unfolding now is shaping you for eternity. When the plan finally manifests, others may see success, but you'll see scars. You'll know the nights you wrestled, the tears that fell, the prayers whispered in exhaustion. And in that knowledge, you will bow in worship, not because everything turned out easy, but because everything turned out holy. The same God who began the work has proven Himself faithful to complete it. Every unseen detail, every delay, every detour was part of a divine choreography that led to this moment. Fulfillment is not the end of God's plan, it's the revelation of His nature. It shows you that He is not just powerful, but personal, not just sovereign, but intimate. He didn't just work for you, He worked in you. He turned your pain into wisdom, your waiting into worship, your scars into stories. The fulfillment of God's plan in your life is not a celebration of what you've done, it's the unveiling of who He is, faithful, patient, and perfect in all His ways.